welcome back to the Speakeasy. I'm Greg Benson here with a special bonus podcast. If you've been anywhere near a smartphone or computer or television set in the last 2 weeks, you have no doubt been exposed to the tragic and heartbreaking and just absolutely devastating news coming out of Los Angeles. It's a tragedy on a pretty massive scale that's kind of hard to just wrap your head around at this point, but I think that we can all comprehend the life-changing effects that this is going to have on not only the people that were affected directly, that lost their homes, but on the city of Los Angeles in general. And because our listeners are the best people in the world, it's true, proven by science. I've got the studies. Ask me anytime. Happy to link them. I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast is wondering, okay, well, what can I do in my capacity to help out, to help the people that are affected, specifically the people in the service industry, which is why we wanted to do a special bonus podcast here with Amanda Gunderson, the founder and CEO of Another Round, Another Rally, based in LA. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I want to start out with just sort of asking, how are you doing? Because this is, Another Round, Another Rally is, you guys go everywhere. You've done a lot of amazing work since you were founded in the pandemic. I love how the mission and the scope of what you're doing has changed and evolved since then. But like I said in the introduction, this hits close to home for you because you are an Angeleno, correct?
Yes, I am. And thank you so much for asking, by the way. But I am not only an Angeleno, but I live on the east side. So I live very close to where the Eaton fire was. I don't live close enough that I was worried that the Eaton fire was going to burn down my house. But I do live close enough that my whole yard, my patio, my house is all just covered in ash. And, it was falling like snow here for a few days. And it's hard to see that and not think like, that's somebody's house. It was just excruciatingly devastating. It was, the night that everything broke out in the Palisades. I was just watching, jaw dropped on TV just as much as everybody else, and then I started to smell a fire, and I just thought, there's no way that could be the Palisades all the way over on my side of town. And so I Googled it and saw that the Eaton Canyon fire had broken out, and I just started texting friends, and that I know live over there, and everybody had evacuated. Everybody was like, I'm fine. But pretty much all of my friends had also just kind of taken an overnight bag. They weren't really thinking that their houses would be gone the next day. And it's hard to really understand how crazy the winds were. It was 100-mile-an-hour winds. That's hurricane level 2 force winds that were happening here. My house was shaking all night, like an earthquake was happening, basically all day and all night. And my dogs were so scared, they were hiding under the bed all day and night. It was a really tough night. And I have this giant tree in my backyard, and it was blowing sideways all night, and I was so afraid that it was going to break and hit the house behind me. And the first thing I did the next morning was just run out and look at that tree to make sure it was still standing, which fortunately it is, but my neighbor's trees are not. So it was really devastating. I ended up having to evacuate because I live in a high risk fire zone area, and I just came back to town on Tuesday, and Wednesday was my first day back at my yoga studio, which is in Pasadena. And I practice with a lot of people in Altadena. I practice with a lot of people who lost their homes. And it smells still like the fire there in the yoga studio. And I walked in, and just as soon as I walked in, everybody was like, "Oh my God, it's so good to see you." And yesterday I went to Trader Joe's for the first time, my grocery store. And I got into the check line, and the checkout guy was like, "Oh my God, it's so good to see you. How are you? How's your house?" And it really did. It reminds you just how important your direct community is. And my direct community was deeply affected by this fire.
Well, it also really it brings into sort of heartbreaking contrast, doesn't it? The way people behave when they are actually interacting with one another face to face and forced to confront, the humanity of a situation like this versus how shitty people can be on Twitter about,
Right, right.
like shaking their fist at, I don't know, everyone from Elon Musk to Gavin Newsom and look, I'm not saying that those individuals are blameless. Lord knows I could go off on both of them for a really, really long time. But,
Right, but
it brings into relief the fact that human beings in a crisis do tend to be, you know, just objectively better. And that's really where you can kind of see the best version of humanity. And it brings into stark relief the fact that Twitter is where you see the worst version of ourselves.
It's true. I mean, just on Tuesday night when the Eaton Canyon fire broke out and I could smell it in my house, I live alone, and so I was afraid of
Mhm.
going to sleep that night. I packed a bag, I packed up my car, I packed up everything for my dogs, all the medications, the deed to my house, and my passport, just the things that you think of, and I put it all in my car that night just in case we got evacuated in the middle of the night. I made a plan to go evacuate to my friend Erin's house. She lives in West Hollywood, because her apartment building can take dogs, and she was kind of in the middle of the city, and so I felt like it was a safe place to go. And then I texted my neighbors. I have neighbors next to me, and then the neighbors next to that, and we're all good friends. We'll do happy hour at each other's houses sometimes and stuff. And I just texted them and said, "Hey guys, if there's an evacuation order tonight, can you please make sure that I know about it, because I'm just going to go to sleep right now." And everybody was like, "Yes, none of us will leave unless we all have talked to each other, have seen each other, have made sure that we're all getting out of here." So even just that small detail. But then the next day, that was my evacuation plan. And I had kind of in my head gone over how I could get to errands without jumping on a freeway and getting kind of locked in gridlock that way. And then the next day, the fire broke out in Hollywood, and it was close enough to Erin that she was packing a bag. So when I did evacuate, I ended up going out to Arizona to be with my coworkers because we needed to get work done because we just activate around disasters, so we needed to start getting our work done. But also, my exit routes around the city were also on fire. There were actually 23 wildfires burning over the course of that couple of days. I mean, there's still a couple that are burning now, the big ones, but we had 23 across the city burning at the same time.
Oh my God. And like I was just saying, the internet is a horrible place to get information about anything, particularly a disaster. As we all know, the only place people should be getting their news from is the multi-award winning podcast, The Speakeasy.
For
Um,
sure.
and in that spirit, I think wanted to share some of not only your personal experience, but some stats about neighborhoods and homes and pertinent to our audience, places of work, restaurants, bars, hospitality spaces that have been affected by that.
Yeah. One of the hardest stats to hear is that 27 people have died so far and
Mm.
18 are still missing. I just can't imagine, putting myself in the shoes of somebody who has lost somebody in this, or is just trying to still find their loved one, their friend, their coworker. There are, well, you already said there were 23 wildfires burning. The two biggest ones were the Palisades and Eaton Canyon. It destroyed more than 12,000 structures. So homes, small businesses, cars, and a lot of restaurants are included in that. The fire so far has burned down 60 square miles, which, to put that in perspective, that's almost three Manhattans. It's been just the most expensive, most destructive natural disaster in California history for sure, maybe in American history, because of the amount of money it's going to take to rebuild those places. But we lost a lot of historic places as well. And we lost really vibrant communities. The Palisades is a beautiful, vibrant community. And I think a lot of people think of it, to your point about people pointing fingers and kind of being nasty online. I think people, sorry, I just saw something pop up on my phone. I apologize for that. But I think people kind of think about the Palisades as being this celebrity enclave. And so people are like, oh, it's so hard for me to feel bad for your $1 million, multi-million dollar, home burning on the ocean front. But it's also a lot of families that have lived there for a very long time. A lot of senior citizens, a lot of young families that are there, people who've been there generation after generation, passing down their homes from generation to generation. It's also the place where a lot of hospitality workers work, and it's a place where it keeps a lot of gardeners employed, a lot of housekeepers employed. There's a lot of people who lost a lot in the Palisades fire, including rich folks too, who, I mean, it's their livelihood, their home, their everything is gone. So I've been having a little bit of a hard time hearing that type of talk online, and I've been trying to shut it out because it's just so awful to sort of celebrate any sort of disaster in this way. In Eaton Canyon. It was right behind Altadena. And Altadena is a historically diverse neighborhood. I mean, you'll have Black families living next to Japanese American families, living next to a mixed, you know, marriage family, and all of their kids are going to school together. It really, there's maybe no other neighborhood in LA that really shows so clearly what it means to be in Southern California and what you have access to and who the people are. I mean, it's just this wonderful melting pot, but it's also a deeply historically important city to our neighborhood, to our city, because when there was redlining happening in the city, Altadena was a place that Black families, especially Black middle class families, could buy homes without any trouble or issue from the bank. So there's a lot of Black folks that live in that neighborhood and have passed homes down from generation to generation. It's even the place where, when he was playing for the Dodgers, where Jackie Robinson lived. There's a lot of important Black people that are today leaders in our society and culture that have come out of Altadena. And so, it's when we talk about rebuilding, we're not just talking about building homes or building buildings that businesses can be in. We're talking about rebuilding that community, that neighborhood, bringing back those people and not displacing them too far away. And that neighborhood lost a lot of restaurants, bars, etc. But some of the restaurants are considered to be historic, have been there since 1940 or something like that. A lot of those houses have been there for 100 years. So we lost a lot in that particular fire.
Yeah, and I mean the thing about the devastation and like you were saying, the scope of this, what, three Manhattans at this point? Do I have that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, is it's just that like, this is the biggest that Los Angeles has ever been, and as our cities get larger and get denser, this is a thing that's going to come for huge swaths of, just like you were saying, people's lives, not just homes, historic buildings, restaurants, like pieces of history and that pieces of people's lives that transcend the physical. And I think that's really sort of I mean, obviously the loss of human life is the paramount tragedy, but I think the
right.
loss of that history and those legacies is right up there with it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the hospitality workers here, there's a number of hospitality workers, chefs, bartenders, management that lost their homes during these twin flames that were happening in our city. I think also what happened is everybody was so scared that they were about to have to be evacuated, and the winds kind of died down over the weekend and then picked up again Monday, Tuesday. So everybody's on high alert. Nobody in the city is sleeping, and nobody's leaving their house. I mean, I was afraid to leave my house because I have two dogs and I didn't want an evacuation notification to come when I was not at home. I didn't want to be going towards my house while everybody was trying to get out and then try to,
Hmm.
be in that mess. And I think everybody was in that same boat. So even if you didn't lose your restaurant, even if you didn't lose your place of work, you lost like a week's worth of tips in that week because nobody was going out and about. And then it's also like the mental beatdown of having to, either lose your job or your home or both. We all know people who lost one or both of those things. And so, we're all trying to be supportive of friends. We're all jaw dropped. I mean, when you think about the restaurants we lost, I cannot believe Fox's is gone in Altadena. I cannot believe Moon Shadows is gone in the Palisades. I mean, it's just things that have just been there forever. And so we're all sort of shouldering the grief at the same time when we're trying to go and like make cocktails for people and make good food for people and welcome them back out of their homes as everybody starts to creep out. That's where they're going to get some sense of normalcy again, is to hospitality workers. And so while the hospitality workers here are grieving, they're also putting on the show and letting everybody kind of come back and have a nice place to be. It's a lot. It's a lot for everybody here.
Well, that is, I mean, everyone in our industry likes to talk about how, well, I mean, in our industry here in New York, where I live, which a lot of New Yorkers think is the center of the universe, and they can make a pretty good. I'm not going to say they're right. I'm just saying they have a good argument that we
A
should hear
pretty
out.
good argument.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I was a little bit too young for this, but I know people who remember that after 9/11, everyone was like, oh my God, restaurants and bars are gonna, tank, places are gonna close, no one's gonna want to go out to eat, everyone's gonna be too paralyzed and grief stricken. And the exact opposite thing happened. Like
Yeah.
September 12th, the bars were full, and they were full again on
Yeah.
the 13th and the 14th because one, people needed an outlet to blow off some steam. And I think there's also a very human sort of let's drink and be merry for tomorrow we may die mentality that comes
Yeah.
in situations like this. And one thing that, I mean, that's great for the businesses. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I think, a lot of these places are places that still exist today. And I'm glad that they do. I'm glad that they've survived for that long. But it does take, as you've alluded to, a psychological toll on the people who have to run these businesses, the people who have to be up there under those lights, putting on that show and creating that atmosphere of hospitality when, you as the guest, unless you're a beloved regular, are never going to know the full extent of what the person, mixing your margarita is going through that day.
Right. It's so true. But on the flip side of it taking a real psychological toll on everybody, it is amazing to see what the hospitality industry has already done in LA. You know, i- Immediately World Central Kitchen was here, and so many chefs and restaurant owners around the city, all over the city, just started cooking for people. In the beginning, I feel like they were just cooking for first responders, and then everybody started losing their homes, and so they started cooking for people in need. And right now, I just looked at it this morning. World Central Kitchen has 23 meal distribution sites around Los Angeles. I didn't want to list them all here, but you can go to their website and find if you're somebody in need of that and there is something close to you. There's 23 of them around the city. And, I wanted to talk about not just what our nonprofit is doing, but I wanted to highlight a couple of other ones too. So I might as well use this moment to say World Central Kitchen is a great place to put some dollars if you have some. They're
Oh
doing
yeah.
amazing work.
No, I love World Central Kitchen, and I'm from DC originally, so I've been a big Jose Andres stan for a little
Same.
while. Washington DC, not the center of the universe, and everyone who
Everyone,
says it is deserving of a pat on the back and a like, oh honey, of course,
of
sure it
course.
is, sure it is, you sweet summer child.
So funny.
Anywho,
Yeah. I mean, I love Jose too. I worked for him at the Bazaar in Los Angeles that actually ended up closing during the pandemic. But I love him so much. I think he's such a wonderful human being. And it's, it's so nice to see him just rally all of the chefs in town and everybody's making, 250, 300, 500 meals a day right now. And it's all being funded by World Central Kitchen. And so at some of these places, you might be getting some of the finest chefs in the city making your lunch, but you also might get one of the best taco trucks. They've mobilized the trucks and the chefs around town for this meal distribution site network.
and that's his superpower too, is he just like I feel like he's only 1 degree of separation away from all the other 8 billion people on this planet, and he is very, very good at using that network for great causes like this. And speaking of great causes, we could sit here and, shine up Jose all day. I would love to do. Honestly, Jose Andres, if you're listening, come on the podcast. I only have nice things to say
Please.
about you.
He is so
Um,
fun. He would probably
yes.
drink with you he'd probably be having a gin and tonic with you while you were doing the podcast. He's
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
so fun.
Yeah, in fact, let's table that until we can do it in person, Jose. You and me. It's been a while. We should catch up. But we also in the studio today have the equally amazing Amanda Gunderson of Another Round, Another Rally. So talk to us about what you and your amazing nonprofit that you run are all about, and some of the work that you do in general, but in this situation specifically.
Sure. Okay, so we do two buckets of money. Everything is for hospitality workers. One bucket of money is for professional development work. So we have a bunch of amazing educational opportunities coming up this year. We have some really killer cultural trips that we're going to be sending people on, and we do a lot of mentorship programming. So it's something you can follow us on Instagram at Another Round, Another Rally, and that's generally where we make announcements about these opportunities that are coming up. We also do emergency funding. And so within that, we have a number of different funds that we do. We have the Chris Patino Hero Fund that is for people who get an unexpected diagnosis of cancer, who work in hospitality. But we have two other funds that I really want to highlight here for this, or three actually. We have three mental health programs. We have one for LGBTQ workers, one for Black folks in the industry, and we just launched one in Spanish. So we have one for Spanish speakers in the industry as well. So that's one way that we can help right now in this big disaster, is that we do have those facilities available to people. The other thing that we do is we raise in disaster relief, we raise money and we just give out direct emergency grants. We do that all year. So if you have another type of emergency come up, you can apply for a grant from us. But during a disaster, we tend to focus just on our disaster relief programming. They aren't huge grants, but that we've done that so that we can sort of spread the money around. But they're $500, so they're not the least amount of money either. It's like enough money that you can pay your phone bill, you can put some gas in your car, some diapers on your baby, some food in your belly, and just kind of stay connected to the outside world. Right now, we've given out already over $32,000. It sounds like a lot of money, but we've only, even at $500, we've only been able to touch 64 people with that money. So we definitely can always use more. If you donate to our disaster relief fund, you can do it at disasterrelief.anotherroundanotherrally.org. That money will go directly into the pockets of people who are facing this disaster right now. And if you are facing the disaster and you need to apply, you can go to disasterrelief.anotherroundanotherrally.org. There is a place there where you can also apply. So you can donate, you can apply, or there's also an area where there's like tools for setting up your own fundraiser if you wanted to throw a fundraiser yourself. And if you're applying, please keep an eye out for an email. Once you've been approved, we'll just ask you for your preferred form of payment, and then you'll get the payment almost immediately. So just keep an eye out on that email. A lot of people are getting paid in the same day that they're applying. If you're just keeping in contact, we have somebody who's working very diligently on it right now. So you can get money very, very quickly from us. We're very nimble in that department. We were sort of born in the pandemic, and from that, we learned a lot. And since then, we've done a number of disaster relief moments. And every time we get a little quicker, a little better. So, it's here for you if you are in need of it. Come online and apply. We also have fundraisers right now happening all over the country. So you can also look for your local fundraiser. There's a lot of things that are still like they're putting dates on the calendar and that kind of thing, but we do have a couple of them coming up in Los Angeles. And this is just to name a few. We have one in Austin, we have one in Portland, we have one in Denver, one in Boston, one in Miami that's probably going to go across the whole few days of South Beach Food and Wine. We have a big one happening in San Francisco on February 23rd. And then, of course, again, the ones that are happening here in LA. And I would encourage anyone in LA working in hospitality to come out to these LA fundraisers. If you want, throw some money into the till, that would be great. It's a great way to raise a little bit of money. But those LA ones I think are more important, that we just bring the community together. That we all get a chance to hug each other and cry together and grieve together and just look each other in the eye and say, so glad that you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, again, we're talking about the differences of human beings in the abstract versus human beings in practice in one-on-one interactions. And that is, I think, an extremely important part of, you can't secure your own mask before helping others. Like, you can't help other people unless you've taken even the first few steps of just like acknowledging what this loss meant to you and going through your grieving process. And it's a process, it's not a like, you break down for 45 minutes and you're like, whoo, glad I got that out of my system. I don't know. Maybe some people out there
Yeah.
are like that. If you are, I envy you. But
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that it's great that you're creating these spaces, because allowing for the emotional wounds to start healing is just as important as allowing for the physical and the financial, in terms of,
Yeah.
getting people's lives back on track.
It seems also like there's a lot of like noise going on. Oh, is Trump's blaming Gavin Newsom? Gavin Newsom popping back Trump, like whatever. And what you're reminded of when you're actually in it, when you're actually living through it, when you're actually watching your local reporters report on something while their own house is burning down. When you're really in the community of it happening, is when it comes time for you to check on your neighbors, and make sure everybody is getting out of okay or whatever. You do not care if your neighbor is black or white, if they're rich or poor, if they're Republican or Democrat. You're just getting them to safety, and they're getting you to safety, and that is really what matters. And so it's almost like I personally can't even hear the chatter right now, because I'm so in love with my city and so heartbroken of what's happening. And I'm so in love with the first responders and all of the chefs that are cooking their hearts out. I mean, there's a chef who lost his house who is cooking for World Central Kitchen and feeding people in spite of the fact that his house is gone. It's seeing the whole community come together like this. It really, it's the worst disaster, but the best of humanity has shown up.
Is it fucked up that I got like slightly jealous there of just like there is something about, the worst circumstances that bring out the best in, well, and the worst in people, but like I choose to believe that human beings are fundamentally good, partially because the inverse is just too horrifying to
Yeah,
contemplate. And if I really believed that to be true, I don't think I could ever walk out my front door
yeah.
ever. But it is really lovely to just see those expressions of humanity.
And just like I said, we have all of those fundraisers going on. There's more and more people reaching out every day wanting to put one on. It's all so effective. It all goes right into a good cause, right into people's pockets. But we've been so humbled and jaw dropped by how much the whole hospitality community has been like, how can I help? It's been really amazing.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that, because I'm sure a lot of people that are listening, and one of the reasons we wanted to do this show, our people are, as we all know, the best people, hospitality industry folks. And I'm sure everyone that's listening has thought at least at some point, like, how can I help? Not like, do anything performative, but what is the way that I can sort of maximize my contribution to this? And one of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever gotten is that when you have money, use it to save time. And when you have time, use it to save money. So I think a lot of people who are listening out there might have time, but no money, or money, but no time. So if you have one or both of those things, what is the best way for you to spend it helping folks that have been affected by this tragedy?
Well, if you have money, the three nonprofits that I would highlight here today are World Central Kitchen, as we spoke about, Another Round, Another Rally. That money, you can rest assured that it's going to go into this disaster fund and go right into somebody's pocket and change their life in like the best way. Even though it's $500, it just will tide people over. And then there's another one that I wanted to highlight. There's a program here called Know Us Without You. It's a couple of guys. They started in the pandemic as well. And what they do is they just work with food retailers and they're able to get food together and they just drive around town and drop it off to hospitality workers. They service anyone in hospitality industry, but I think they mainly have a lot of people in the back of the house that they're dropping off to. And they have gotten it down to a great science where $33 can feed a family of four for a week. So even if you only have 33 bucks, go drop it into the Know Us Without You pocket. We'll take $5, $10, $50, $500, whatever you have that you can come up off of. But and like I said, that will go directly into the disaster relief fund. If you donate to us outside of the disaster relief fund, we'll still be putting it into something that will be helpful, like the mental health grants and those types of things that people really need right now. But if you donate directly to our disaster relief fund, that's where the money is going to go, is to people who are affected by this disaster right now. And like I said, we can, generally speaking, when people apply, get the money out almost the same day. So it's very effective there. If you have time, I would say, consider throwing a fundraiser. You would probably want to talk to your local liquor rep about how to do it, because, so the wild, wild west out there, the liquor laws are so different in every state. So I don't want to tell you like, do this, and then you're in a state where you can't do that, but I know a lot of places there's like people are donating bottles to bring cocktail costs down. There's, liquor reps. I know in Austin, for example, they're just pulling together a bunch of raffle prizes. They're going to do a big raffle. There are people who are donating to us like $2 a cocktail. But it's something that you can do if you have a bar that you work at. You're sort of given this great gift, right? Where you just have a place to entertain people. You have a place to talk to people, to work with people. And so I would say if you have time but you don't have money, maybe if you're not in management, talk to your manager about it. You could run a drink special, or you could throw a little party and just raise a little bit of money for us. Even if you raise, $300, we will take it and make sure that hospitality workers here in Los Angeles are being taken care of with it.
Yeah, and I speaking of hospitality workers in Los Angeles, I guess I have sort of a third part to that question. If someone is listening and they're in the general LA area, is there something specific that they can do to help this, you know, all of the various causes that you just mentioned and then some?
I think World Central Kitchen may be taking volunteers, and Know Us Without You, if they get a flood of money, they will need volunteers because they need help driving food around. So if you have a car, that's a good one to reach out to with them. For us, it's good to just, like I said, show up to the fundraisers and just be, even if you're not putting money in it, you don't have any money, it just being there to look your friends in the eye and say I love you is I think, the most important piece of the fundraisers that we're doing in LA right now. There are some other places that you can, donate time to. One thing that I've heard kind of overwhelmingly is, we've had a lot of people reach out to us and say we want to do a clothing drive for LA, and it's something that we don't have the infrastructure that we're set up for. So I talked to Know Us Without You. They also don't have the infrastructure for that. It's really hard work. It's You have to have a lot of space to do a lot of the sorting and all of that kind of stuff. And so what's happening is I think I love LA so much for this, but I think a lot of the donation centers are being overwhelmed by donations. And so a lot of those centers just need people to come and help sort it out. Like, this is all a women's size small, this is shoes, this is toys for kids. They need help just sorting everything. And I heard that the Humane Society also was overwhelmed with donations, blankets, bowls, those kinds of things. A lot of people have to surrender their pets. There was a place out there in Altadena, there's a lot of people with large pets. So there was like horses and stuff like that that needed to find housing. So they've been really having a hard time. So one thing that you could do is contact the Humane Society in Pasadena and see if you can foster a little cat or a dog for a week or two. They're asking for a minimum of a week. But I think they had to redistribute what the population that they already had to other humane societies so that they could take in the amount of pets that people just had to no choice but to surrender because they don't have a place to live with them right now. They're staying in hospitals, or I mean, not hospitals, excuse me. They're staying in hotels or Airbnbs or something like that.
Yeah, it's it's a tragedy on an immense scale, and everywhere you look, there's another horrible thing that you have to consider, have to confront. I mean, I'm a cat person myself, and just the thought of
Yeah,
having to give up, because they're family members. That's the
yeah.
thing
I
is
I could
they're
I don't know what I would do if I had to give up my dogs. It's just such an unbelievable tragedy. It just like you said, they're family members, and so if you have the capacity to like bring in a cat, and just give them a loving home while they're also confused and scared and sad about, they're wondering where their people are, and if you can do that, do that. Another thing that I signed up for, I believe it's you can email lahikes@gmail.com. But I emailed them to be a volunteer. They got tons of volunteers, but they're going to have tons of work to do because most of these fires started in, natural places, parks and forests and all of that. And one thing about LA that if you live here, and love about this city is that the hikes are incredible all over the city. It's a hilly, mountainous town. There are so many good hikes, even right within the city in Hollywood, where that fire broke out, was right in Runyon Canyon, and it's one of the most popular places in the city to go hiking. And now the hiking trail is gone. Everything's gone, and it's going to need to be cleaned up, and it's going to need to be rebuilt. And there's going to be just a lot of work to do across the whole entire city in terms of kind of rebuilding those hiking trails. So if you're somebody who likes to be outside, it's going to be a while before you can do that type of volunteer work. It's going to be a while before any of us are really let back into our parks. But if you are that type of person, outdoorsy, hiking, come on over and put your name in the list of volunteers, and we'll just rebuild our parks together.
well, I'll say I've told this story a lot on the show, which is that I had for the first 35 years of my life never been to Los Angeles. And, I'm East Coaster, born and raised, love it out here. And every time I would have a friend come back from a visit to LA, I would always ask them, "Hey, how was your trip?" They would say the exact same thing. They would look me in the eye and say, "Oh my God, it was so great. You would hate it there." And I'd always be like, "Why?" And they'd be like, "I don't know. It's just like, it's kind of laid back and like chill. And there's just kind of like a real, just like mellow vibe." And I'm like, are you saying I'm too much of a stressed out East Coast anxiety monster to enjoy a slower pace of life? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. That's a fair read. But I'll tell you this, I finally made it for a visit that was too short for 24 hours this past summer. And I loved it. And I loved exactly what you're talking about, like the hiking, the culture, the restaurants, the historic buildings downtown. But one thing that really struck me about it that I was not expecting, that I was impressed by, is that I was expecting it to be a very vast and disconnected place. And I think one of the reasons I enjoy New York City is that the atmospheric PSI here feels just like a little bit higher. It feels like just a little bit more compressed, and there's just more of a sense of urgency to everything that I really enjoy. And I was very pleasantly surprised to find that in LA, because I feel like both cities kind of press down on their residents with the same sort of like psychological responsibility. Not
Hmm.
It's not just the burden of living in both of those places, but you feel like you're part of something that's larger than yourself. And I think some of the least favorite places that I've been in the United States are lacking that in a really, really big way.
I feel like people can get surprised too by the hospitality industry here, particularly cocktails, because when people think of like amazing cocktails for so long, for so many years, it was like, oh, New York, New York, New York, that's what's happening. And New York has dope cocktails. But the thing about LA is that we have access to all of this giant fruit, like all this beautiful produce, and kind of year round. I mean, you can get huge limes and huge lemons and just there's also the things that are just seasonal that come in that are
Well,
just like
we can get those here too. They just
fantastic.
come with a side of guilt about, how much carbon footprint it took to
and,
get them to
and
New
your
York
limes are
City in
like this
January.
big,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
The limes are tiny, and like, and we
So,
just have
so
like,
we just shouldn't, is what I'm
yes,
saying.
exactly, and we have access to so many good seasonal items and stuff, and so it's interesting to be making cocktails in a city that is basically has a farmer's market in every neighborhood on any given day of the week, where you can just go and buy directly from the farmers. It's really such a lovely piece of the cocktail culture here.
Yeah, and I'm excited for the day that I can go back, because I think that, one of the things that we're talking about here is that level of feeling like you're a part of something larger than yourself breeds this real sort of pride and sense of responsibility for, making the place that you live in as being, not just a spectator, but being a contributor. You want to be a part of this legacy of this place. And I guess I want to ask you, because I know that this is just, there was no way around it. This was kind of going to be the doom and gloom hour of the speakeasy. There's no way to really put a
Hmm.
silver lining or a positive face on anything like this. But I did want to ask you, because, of course, any disaster like this comes out with think pieces about how, like, such and such city will never recover, or this is the death of that thing you like. I mean, it's inevitable. It's like the swallows
Hmm.
returning seasonally. There's just nothing, there's no way to get out of that happening. But it sounds like you very firmly believe that that is not the case. And I would love to give you a chance to sort of rebut that in some of the things that you're seeing on the ground.
Okay, I will just say that the humanity of this city is just chef's kiss, second to none. I mean, right now it is just such a beautiful thing to see. And I do think that we'll be able to rebuild the parks and the trails. I'm concerned about Altadena. I am concerned about that community being able to come back. Anytime this happens, same thing what happened in Lahaina. There's just a giant land grab. And there's people who are already coming in and preying on people who lost their homes, trying to buy them out from under them and whatnot. So we'll see what happens there. I don't want to sugarcoat that one too much. But I have been giving this a lot of thought. It'll be interesting to see. There's been a little bit of a vertical rise in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
There's been, as the city has grown, I've lived here since 1998. I was just thinking earlier, I moved here in the 1900s. Like, I was
As the
here.
children say these
Yeah,
days, much to our dismay.
exactly, in the 19th century. I moved to LA. But anyway, so I've been here for a long time. And so I've seen the city change. I've seen like a kind of flat, parking lot strip mall turn into a very tall building of apartments and shops on the bottom. And, I've just seen a lot of that go on around the city. And it's one of the things that I was so struck by the first time I took the architectural boat tour in Chicago, because I did not know this until I took that tour, that apparently Chicago is the birthplace of the skyscraper. Because when they had that great Chicago fire, it came along that river, tore everything down, and then they had just a finite amount of, land that of real estate, and they wanted to maximize that amount of real estate, and so that's how all those big skyscrapers started popping up all along the river there. And I mean, that's, if any, it's of all the touristy things you could do in any city, that one is my most favorite, that architectural boat tour. I highly recommend outside of this podcast, because you could see like the skyscrapers from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. It's really such a wonderful, interesting tour. But I've been chewing a lot on that, on my experience on that tour lately, as I'm thinking about how this city is going to be rebuilt, how they're going to rebuild the Palisades. Will we see more condos over there? Will we see homes? Will we see high-rise buildings coming in places that we've never seen them before? It'll be very interesting, how it all pans out. But the one thing I would say is, if you live in Altadena and you can handle it, don't sell your land. Don't sell it. Keep it. Rebuild it. Come back. Be a part of your community again. We'll rebuild it all together. Los Angeles will come together and help rebuild it.
Well, this might be a little Norman Rockwell of me, but I am always of the opinion that if there is something on your mind that you think of, you should write your congressperson about it. I think it, or better yet, your city council member, some elected
Mm-hmm.
representative. The more local and targeted, aka the smaller number of constituents you have, the better. Because writing, well, in a few days, writing the president of the United States is going to be fucking useless anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
pretend we live in a normal universe for a second. Writing the president of the United States, you are one like 0.00001% of that person's constituency. Your
Right.
city council member, you could be like one of, I don't know, maybe 5 people that wrote them that week about
Right.
whatever's on your mind. I have always gotten a good return on investment from, just shooting off a quick email like, hey, I'm concerned about this. Just wanted to let you know. Keep me posted. And with housing shortages and housing supply and housing insecurity being such a big issue that I think is going to really become a make or break issue for the latter half of this decade.
Yeah.
I think that this is something that, people need to make it known that I don't want to speak for the city of Los Angeles. I'll leave that to you, Amanda. But we don't want, multi-million dollar condos. We don't want, luxury apartments here. We want like affordable neighborhoods. We want these
Yes.
to be places that like normal average human beings can live, because those are the spots where, to bring it back to our raison d'etre, those are the spots where you get really amazing people trying new things. Like, you can't open up a restaurant in Times Square and be like, whoa, this is kind of a big swing. I hope this works. But you can do that in a place where, rents are low. You've got a lot of, maybe younger single people who aren't making as much money and who can afford to kind of like, try something that's maybe a little bit more out there. Like that is where good ideas come from. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, what's the name of the mayor of LA again? The one that everyone's
Uh,
savaging right now? Karen
Karen
Bass. Is that
Bass.
it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to maybe shoot her an email and just be
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, we're looking down the line, but this could be a place to maybe start addressing that whole affordable housing crisis that everyone's talking about, especially in California.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, she has been doing a lot to try and deal with that right now, because, we're getting the Olympics in a few years and the whole world will have eyes on us. And so I know that she is really considerate of our housing needs. And this just is a whole new level of the need. I mean, at one point there was like, I don't know, I think it was like almost 300,000 people. I don't think it got that high, but I think it was almost 300,000 people that were evacuated, and a lot of those people lost their homes. And so, where do they go? I was watching the news, and there was one woman in Altadena who was like, I lost my house. My mom lost her house. My father-in-law lost his house. My cousin Tina lost her house. My grandmother lost her house. And she just rattled off like 12 family members. It's like, where do you go when you can't even go to your family's house because they lost it all too? Like, where are those people right now? And like, how do we find them? How do we get our hands around them and put our arms around them? And that's to your point earlier of like, maybe go and help sort and help, deliver and help do those things and help rebuild our parks together and all of that if you just have time. But money is also extremely helpful for people right now.
Time, money, and it's gonna sound corny, but it's I'm gonna end this on a cornball note and just love, man. Just like
For
get out there
sure.
and show people that you care about them. There's a real shortage of that right now. So, don't
Yeah.
be don't be a loser. Be vulnerable. Go out there, give people hugs. Just if they
Yeah.
if they want it, if they want the hugs, just be nice, I
Yeah.
guess
I
is what
mean,
I'm
I think
saying.
everywhere in LA right now, the top question when you see someone that you maybe haven't seen in a little while or even a few days or whatever is, how are you? Are you okay? Is your family okay? Is your house okay? I mean, just everybody in LA is just that's what the question is on top of everybody's mind. And just even just asking that question is showing the love, just checking in and making sure everyone's okay.
Yeah. That's what it's all about, man. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show and for checking in with our listeners and our people and giving them
Thank
ways
you.
that they can check in and make sure everybody else is okay. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I'm glad that you and your pals that I see in the background there are safe as well.
Thank you so much for having me. And we've sufficiently bored one of my dogs into snoring right now. So I don't know if
Oh,
you can
good,
hear her,
great.
but she's
And we were
snoring,
and we were concerned this podcast would be so lively that she'd be running around barking. No,
barking.
this is what a ringing
Yeah.
endorsement for this show.
But thank you so much for having me. And thank you for giving another round, another rally a minute to get on here and share all of the things that we're doing. And like I said, the best thing that you guys can do outside of donating and putting together, fundraisers and stuff is just follow us on Instagram at another round, another rally. That's where we have all our announcements, all of our anything that we might need to share with you will be there.
Amazing. And we're going to put links to all of the organizations and drives and whatnot that you were highlighting on the show in the show notes as well. But for now, that is going to do it for us on this special bonus episode of the Speakeasy. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Stay safe. Love to LA. And until next time, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.